recorded now too.
Perfect. All right. So I'm going to give some brief backstory about my predominant creative work. I began experimenting with non-carved, naturally colored found wood as a material for assemblage sculpture while in college in Prescott, Arizona, 19 years ago at 19 years old. I started without any relevant influences. Let me just make this bigger. There we go. So I started without any relevant influences, with the possible exception of Andy Goldsworthy. So I had no knowledge of other found wood artists to emulate or to reverse engineer from. In this sense, I really consider myself to have been an artistic pioneer in the medium exploring unknown frontier. The advantage of being among the first creators in a new medium is that one's work, if people think it's any good, tends to stick out and receive attention since it's novel and unusual. However, I found that innovation can also have its drawbacks. In all honesty, I encountered so many challenges in 19 years of trying to make and sell art that I have nearly given up on it as a business, losing more money than I've made in order to create inventory. Right now, I pick up unreliable, physically taxing side work to afford rent, living way below the national poverty standard, pretty much exemplifying the role of the starving artist, despite being internationally known. And just getting known took me about 15 years. My inspiration in the form of setting and found wood materials has been procured and sustained here in Sonoma County, a place that so far, ironically, has not been financially sustainable for me to create in. Cost of living is pretty high here. I found that in my sculptural work, despite the interest it generates, it does not really get monetarily rewarded proportionally for the amount of time, labor, and sometimes odds-defying magic that goes into it. For the merit that I and others have felt is evident in my work, and evident in the work of a few other notable found wood artists' work, the medium at large is so far not really recognized as highbrow in the upper echelons of the art world. Regardless, from my experience with feedback, I feel the general public begs to differ, seeing that my art is received by many with great enthusiasm. A lot goes into what I do. My sculptures require a rather inordinate amount of time, travel, supplies, and especially physical space for me to be productive. My materials alone come from thousands of miles apart, having gathered the pieces of wood myself from 38 American states and 3 other countries, an estimated 20,000 hand-picked pounds over the last 15 years. Throughout the advanced stages of my development in the medium, I have taken a quality over quantity approach to creating my work. This may not have been the most practical way to go about art as a business, but I do believe this approach has been imperative in my becoming known. Currently working on art part-time, I finish an average of 2 to 3 sculptures per year. If I worked full-time with my current circumstances, I might double that amount in a year. My record is 5 in a year, and that was a really good year. To put this in a different perspective, if I was a painter or a ceramicist, I might create 50 to 100 works or more in the same amount of time. What I'm getting at is, my work is very difficult to create by way of trial and error, which is probably why there are so few found wood sculptors across the globe known for producing exceptional work, and I might mention even less who don't carve or modify their found wood substantially. As much resistance as I've had I've given serious thought to going production mode. Every artist desperate, dreaded, sell yourself cheap. Oh boy, is this not loading the whole time? Is it paused here the whole time?
Yes, it's been paused.
Yeah, that's too bad. Let's see if I can undo it. There we go. Sorry about that. I've given serious thought to going production mode, and that's sort of the antithesis to my preferred purist approach, creating faster, cheaper art so that I can actually sell it in volume to a wider array of collectors. Creating works that often take several years to complete can be very difficult to sell at price points that justify such time and effort. Galleries take 30 to 50% of artists' sales before taxes, and many galleries have refused my art based on them deeming it inaccessibly priced for the average art collector. So after being rejected countless times by higher end galleries, I decided to try to go around galleries via the art fair route by exhibiting to the public in mostly wealthy areas of California by way of paid-for booths, art booths. Art fairs were excellent for exposure of my serious work, but they still cost me all of my disposable income plus more. After doing about 7 art fairs in the last 4 years, I received thousands of oohs and ahs, countless compliments, and even some awards. But after giving out boxes of business cards and gaining some interested prospective clients, not a single sale was made. Gaining followers on social media did not happen as much as I would have liked either. I would watch neighboring booths with artwork I considered somewhat run-of-the-mill do lots of business, and I would leave most of the fairs feeling exhausted and depressed, driving home hundreds of miles sometimes, as embarrassing as it might be, in tears. Doing these fairs was a learning experience. I eventually realized how important large, easily legible signs were, since at least a third of the public did not actually understand what my art even was, and they often wouldn't read my bio or statement, which explained what the work was. I would have to explain over and over that my sculptures were not wood carvings. People were really confused, most of them never having seen anything quite like it. Many who were impressed by my innovation and skill would ask why I wasn't in museums around the world. This was particularly frustrating because I always felt and was told by others that my art was worthy of museums. They thought that that would be imminent if I just kept going with it. But despite proposing to nearly every museum within travelable proximity, all I got was continual rejection. From 2017 on, I began to get recognized more and more around the globe thanks to the internet and a multitude of bloggers using social media platforms. I went semi-viral through the help of boardpanda.com and had a top art post on reddit.com with an estimated 5 million views. I was published in Sculpture Review magazine out of New York City, which is read by art teachers and students in universities across the US. And I was even featured on TV in Moldova as one of their mainstream news on one of their mainstream news channels. Many articles were written about me and my work, but as gratifying as it is to receive acknowledgement and praise, it still feels dire when sales don't take place. The majority of my sales over the years were sales of my early works through my mother and stepfather's New England coastal town art gallery, priced much lower than my more evolved, complex sculptures from which I have made a name for myself. In fact, although my early work sold at a fraction of what my newer inventory goes for, those early work sales actually helped fund the making of my art over the last decade. Some of the more advanced work I'm now known for has been traded rather than sold as a means to survive as an artist. I traded a sculpture for a year's worth of art studio rent several years ago. I probably never would have been able to afford to keep working on art otherwise at that time. I've also traded custom work for photography and other marketing tools outside my means that have helped me get published in a variety of places. Since my sculptures began generating buzz, I was being contacted weekly by galleries and exhibition venues in Rome, Paris, New York City, Rio de Janeiro, all over the world, but none of them would fund transportation costs to or from these destinations, leaving me to take on all the risk myself. That didn't seem like a great idea without a financial safety net. My art, although soundly constructed by a method that took me a decade to develop, is fragile, substantially heavy when safely packaged in crates, and is for me prohibitively expensive to transport and insure when moving at long distances. A few years ago, it became clear to me I needed more capital to succeed in generating art-related income, whether to advertise or even to sell photography prints or whatever else related to my sculptures. I needed to be able to travel for opportunities that I couldn't afford, and I especially needed more workshop space to create in. Considering the need for funding beyond what I could attain on my own, I started applying for numerous artist grants, art prize contests, and other opportunities such as fellowships and residency programs. I paid application fees, wrote essay after essay, expended all sorts of energy hoping and praying, and in the long run, nothing much panned out except my acceptance to an artist residency program. The program was very fulfilling, and it revealed to me experientially how much more prolific I could be if afforded the time, focus, and especially the physical space to properly organize and create with my thousands of pounds of wood. It wasn't much more than a few years ago that I was working in a dilapidated shed that leaked rain and was infested with rats. I became sick for 4 months due to working in a shack with black mold and rodents for roommates. I would get headaches daily and suffered from respiratory infections. Around this time, I was also risking my life by going out into storms with an external frame backpack loaded to the brim, climbing rock faces, descending dangerous cliffs, all in order to retrieve materials to create art I wasn't even able to sell. Sometimes it was therapeutic, other times it felt like torture. I got the suspicion then that I might even suffer, at least mildly, from an emotional disorder, realizing my whole life as an artist has been a roller coaster ride of ups and downs. I saw a psychologist that thought there was a good chance I could be bipolar type 2, but upon consultation from a psychiatrist, I turned down medication, understanding mood stabilizers often dull the manic potency of artists with these kind of conditions. And believe it or not, such a mood disorder is quite common among prolific artists and creative types. I realized that in lieu of being addicted to drugs or alcohol like many creative people are, collecting wood in nature was for me a relatively healthy addiction. I was addicted to the hunt for the unknown and found relief in escaping into nature. I felt and still feel this new technological world we live in is so out of balance with how us humans have lived on the planet up until now. Looking back on my life, I realized the roughest patches for me were times in my life when I was less connected to nature. So in a big way, nature is how I reset and deal with my depressive or anxious states. Sort of like Tim Leary said, it's like tuning out of one reality and tuning into another one. Although I've in many ways enjoyed what sometimes feels like a public service and self-sacrifice, my journey has proven quite difficult. I guess what keeps me going is the sense that the world can benefit on a conscious and phenomenological level from beholding my work. There is definitely an ethnobotanical message in my artwork regarding wilderness and the importance of our connectivity to the natural world. It is this unique gift and sense of purpose that compels me to keep creating in hopes of someday realizing career sustainability in the medium, not to mention our collective environmental sustainability as a species. So after telling you of my story, my passion, my woes, I guess I'll leave you all with this. When you come across an artist who strikes you as talented in a unique sort of way, please support them by spreading the word in your community or to anyone you might think to connect them with. If you want them to be able to continue to do what they do, be willing to help them find outlets for business. Because remember, many quote unquote real artists are not natural business people, and most of us really need help. So if you'd like to see me be able to continue my work with Found Wood, please start by following, liking, and sharing my posts on social media. My sculptures can be followed on this YouTube channel, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. Don't have much of a Twitter following yet, but hopefully someday. I guess be sure to search my name with the correct spelling of Eyevan, which is E-Y-E-V-A-N, the first part like in eyeball. And thank you for listening to my story. And I'd certainly like to express gratitude to Tara and 1 Million Cups for inviting me on today. Guess I'll be fielding some of your questions next.
Woo! Thank you.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. That was a really great story. I appreciate you sharing and
Sure.
being
Thank
so
you.
brutally honest and forthright with everything. I think that's exactly what we're looking for here. So I'm going to open it up, and everybody please ask Bennett, Eyevan, your question.
Can you guys hear me okay because of the, okay, I have a loud computer, so let me know, but this is one of the best one of these meetings I've seen, and I just love it for two reasons. I just thought I'd mention this, Bennett. You just gave this whole piece of history that is so relevant to like how people have to struggle for success in anything.
Sure.
And it's just so cool to hear that real, right there from somebody firsthand, because you don't get to hear the stories behind some of these things, and yours is just really serious. Plus, I don't think I've been this emotionally affected by looking at wood ever. I mean, this freaking, I'm just blown away. I mean, I just saw the still pictures on searching your name on Google, and that was enough to really be intriguing. But looking at it right here is just absolutely amazing. So
Thank you.
I'm loving it. Other thing I was going to say is, it's funny you mentioned mood stabilizers. I actually got prescribed one, and it changed my life so much for the better, you wouldn't believe it. And I am not recommending it. I'm just saying that what happened, I was always I guess bipolar to some degree.
Uh-huh.
What happened is, taking this mood stabilizer got rid of all of the worry that was taking up most of my brain. And then I started taking all these risks, which then led me to taking risks in business, which then helped me go up a little bit. And I'm still not a big rich guy by any means, but it was just interesting that there's everything you talked about is great. The one other thing I wanted to mention is, you just told You just said how to spell your name, right? When you said search and make sure you spell Eyevan.
Yes.
That is a word of mouth no-no that you have to tell people somehow how to spell your name. And it's I'm just saying it's a marketing thing that hinders people finding you because you got a unusual spelling. So like, let's say you had a domain name called Eyevan Tumbleweed. Somebody says, hey, you got to go check this guy out. His domain is Eyevan Tumbleweed. Half of those people are not going to even know that that's EYE. I'm just mentioning that it's one of those common things where when somebody says, check out Eyevan Tumbleweed, the other person ain't going to know that there's a second piece of information there that's the spelling. And that
now what, let me get out of this stop share. Okay.
And that's just a data point, not saying you should do anything different.
Well, I'm extremely receptive to that because I realize it is an issue. I just kind of am curious, what would you do if you were me? Would you go by?
I'm going to give a counter opinion so we can have a little debate on this, because one thing that struck me is the Eyevan Tumbleweed, and I understand that it does make, Steve's absolutely right. You know, in the near term, it makes the journey more difficult for you. So when we have that word of mouth conversation, we do have to say that to you. But I also see that your work is very unique, and something about that spelling, and to me, there's a correlation between your pseudonym and your artwork.
Yeah. Well, I also agree. You know, I guess I agree with both of you here. I wouldn't have used the pseudonym if I didn't feel it resonated and had a certain kind of appeal. But the fact that it is spelled differently is a problem, because if somebody goes to Google search and they don't remember the EYE, I usually try to explain it to spell it to people, and they have to ask me 3 times, even if I say, you know, EYE, like your eyeball. They struggle to compute that.
Yeah. I totally agree with Tara, and I didn't say that in mine, which is the connectivity between that pseudonym and your work. I mean, the eyes are what freak me out the most about your work. It's so awesome. Yeah. And there is a way to deal with that, but let me real quick ask you, what's your YouTube channel called? Your channel name?
Sure, it's called Eyevan Tumbleweed Found Wood Sculpture.
Eyevan then?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a domain name, Eyevan?
I do. And the problem with that is that my website's kind of out of date.
Well, the reason I ask is the way you deal with spelling issues. Sometimes you buy the Eyevan version.
Okay.
And you forward that to EYE. And that's one of the ways you deal with spelling ambiguities in online stuff. So it just means that you have 2 domain names, and one of them's to catch the people that don't know how to spell it.
And
they get forwarded.
They send you to the same place.
Yeah. So you go to Eyevan with an I, it would forward to Eyevan, and then people say, oh, okay, I see how to spell it. But you're capturing those word of mouth people, and it's just a forwarding of one domain with the misspelling to correct. Yeah.
Search engine optimization for.
I mean, it's not entirely about that. It's more word of mouth optimization.
Okay. Okay. Well, you know what? That's a great reminder for me to do that. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, they call it a landing page, right?
No, a landing page is any page that is the destination link. So, so a landing is very ambiguous, but basically if you have some ad somewhere and you click on it, you go to the page in a website, maybe, but landing page actually just means that page that you see when clicking on this link, whatever this link is. So what I'm talking about is it's just a redirect type of thing. Okay. So you're buying one domain that redirects to the correct domain. So I actually have it like in domains, you don't want to have something, let's say, with 2 S's in it. So we have a web domain called websiteimpacttest.com. And I'm afraid that some people are going to spell it with only 1 T because they hear website impact test and they don't think to type 2 T's. So I've got the domain name with the misspelled version with 1 T pointing to the domain name with the 2 T's, if that makes sense. So that way I capture the word of mouth people that aren't thinking how to type it
Mm-hmm.
when they hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And then same thing with yours. You could just buy, anyway, it's just $18 a year or less. And you just go to the domain registrar, like mydomain.com. You say, hey, I want this domain and I want to point it to that domain.
Sure.
That's all you have to do.
Sure. That's great advice, and I'm going to take it. So thank you.
And where that comes into play is also, if let's say you have somebody say, check out Eyevan Tumbleweed, and it happens to be on the radio. That's how I look at it.
Right.
They're not going to say, oh, by the way, it's EYE. Anyway.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Can I ask 2 more questions?
Of course.
So I can hog up all the time? I'm kidding. How much does your stuff go for?
So right now, I have different tiers, which I price the tiers accordingly to aesthetic outcome, how proud I am of it, basically, how much work went into it, how many, from the variety of places that it comes from, because that can be very expensive to take wood from, all over the country, other countries, ship it back to myself, and integrate all that different kind of wood from different geographic biomes into one sculpture. So if it's kind of a work where it didn't take me, let's say it's mostly driftwood, which that's another thing I was thinking of when you were talking about the spelling of my name. It's kind of also, driftwood is simple for people to wrap their minds around. So instead of calling it found wood, which is accurate because it's all different kinds of wood, if I just put in driftwood sculpture, that would probably, get more hits and get more attention. But back to your question, there's the first tier is, and then time is another factor. If it takes me 2 years, it's going to go in the highest tier. Most pieces are somewhere in between, and the lowest tier is probably $4,000 to $7,000. The next tier is about $7,000 to $15,000, and then the highest tier is, for relief work, is about $15,000 to $23,000, and all of those prices have sort of actually dropped by either a quarter to a third of what I used to charge, just because I wasn't having things pan out for me. And to be able to keep doing it, I figured I need to drop it, but I didn't want to drop it so low that I'd be better off working at McDonald's. And then to be 100% honest, I probably would even still be better off working at McDonald's. Not for my mental state and for my spirit, but monetarily speaking.
It sounds like then you've calculated in your mind the dollars per hour that it takes.
Yeah, it's a scary thing to do. Like I almost don't want to get out that calculator and do that, but
yeah, okay.
It's better that I don't.
How many pieces do you have for available right now?
Right now, I think I have something like 17. I think.
Yeah, I would think that your price point, Eric can speak to this too. We do an art walk here in Santa Barbara every month, normally when we're not shut down for COVID. But I don't think that your price points are outrageous at all, to be honest with you, especially when you're talking about only being able to create a couple of pieces per year. That is exactly what I would think that these would cost, to be perfectly frank.
Sure. And then it always kind of stings a little bit when people, thank you for saying that. A lot of people tell me, wow, these should be going for, $50,000 to $100,000. They're so amazing. They're so unique. There's nothing like it. And that stings too, because the reality is that I don't sell that way. I'm sure that they could sell that way. I see stuff that is not impressive to me in the least. Could be like a colorist with a frame, and they do 3 squares and it sells at Art Basel for $100,000. Maybe I should just do that. I don't know. I don't want to do that, but pricing of art is a really abstract thing. It's very, from what I've heard, from what I've gathered, it's very political. It's kind of, a good metaphor would be the music industry. You see these amazingly talented musicians and they don't have #1 radio spots, or top radio spots. But then you see some, teeny bopper, dum-dum music, and makes millions and millions and millions of dollars.
I think this is a strange analogy, but I can imagine that Steve in the technology industry can feel your pain quite a bit, because I think that there's I've read a lot of books, like for instance when Google kicked off, and here they had created this thing and they knew the power of it, but they didn't know how to monetize that power. They didn't know how to actually make money from having created this piece of technology that would be useful to so many. So this is one of those places where I love to point out that there are similarities between industries that people would never correlate with each other. For instance, your beautiful art and technology.
And Tara's right on target with what I was thinking, because and what you were saying, Ivan/Bennett, the work we do is so freaking amazingly beneficial, and we've made an extra $1 million for one of our clients. But that's also thought of as a commodity by some people, that you just tell somebody and then all of a sudden they're going to go and do something that they already know, and it's going to automatically bring in business and sales. And it is just painful, because I never am able to guarantee or say I guarantee anything's going to work out right, but every single thing is this big strategic, almost art project that you have to get into the business and figure out what the hell is going to work for them. And it's just a trip, because I'm not good at promoting myself, because my entire brain is on strategizing and working with all sorts of visual information and talking and figuring out stuff. Anyway,
Right.
It just reminded me of what you're saying, because the prices that people are charging for the same stuff we do with lower results is $200 an hour and up, right?
Sure.
And I've subcontracted for people that are making $200 an hour and doing much less and more crappy work than I'm able to charge. And anyway, I'm hoping to the $200 an hour realm one of these decades.
Yeah.
I mean, I probably should be working at McDonald's also, because I have to actually watch dollars per hour. That's why I was asking. I do have to worry about dollars per hour.
We're going to clear this up. I don't want either of you working at McDonald's. You need to focus on the crafts and creations that you do. So Paul and Eric, do you guys have anything to share with Ivan today?
Yeah, just real quick before we take off, Ivan, thank you. This is very informative, and
Thanks.
we're dealing with a lot of the same stuff here in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my internet's going a little in and out right now, but I get it about events. It's really about that exposure. Generally, I agree with Tara. Your price point's right on there. We're about an hour and a half away from LA. We do rely on a lot of those big spenders to come in and enjoy the weekend, enjoy our events, and then generally they aren't necessarily buying on spot, but they'll go online and they were exposed to it, and that's why online's such a huge presence especially for these big sales. But events are also nice too. Generally you're not going to sell a $20,000 art piece at one of our events, but we try to get the people exposed to that artwork, and that's really kind of what it's about, having a good time and then going, yep, that's what I want. I'm gonna go online, get it shipped out, and that's how it goes. They're fun. I enjoy them, but I'm not selling art pieces there, so I get to enjoy the wine, the booze, and the artwork. So
Sure.
You got to just keep going. The barter system, same thing happens here. I mean, some artists, they're bartering for galleries. They're trying to do whatever they can to make a name for themselves. But just what you've done, just everything here, and all the recognitions that you've already gotten, just keep at it, man. I mean, I get it. Less frustrating, especially in this biz, but we need you. We need guys like you to keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Now I've kind of thought about, I think I played my cards right to make to go with my natural impulse and make art the best that I could, because I got known that way. But now that I have the name and people starting to know who I am after almost 20 years, now is the time where if I wanted to, I could, especially if I had more capital and if I had more space. That's kind of the issues that I run into, is that I could produce not necessarily inferior work. I mean, I guess you never know until I try, but if I made a bunch of things at different price points that were lower, I'm sure that art fair kind of way of selling I'd probably leave those fairs with some money in my pocket as opposed to none. And
we've seen that with other artists. For instance, we had a presenter here. They make custom, really beautiful wood products locally here in Santa Barbara. Definitely check them out. It's called Keefrider, Keefrider, custom furniture. And they struggle with exactly what you're saying. They would make these huge, beautiful, elaborate custom pieces, but those take a very specific niche market. So what do you do in the meantime to pay the rent and put food on the table? So they have a segment of their business that does like little pieces for kids and cutting boards, like you said, a lower price point that just keeps them busy in their craft, but
sure.
And gives them a little bit of money, but and gives people like me who are totally broke students to the ability to say, oh, I own an Eyevan Tumbleweed. It's
right. Right. It's just like Picasso did little 5x5 card line drawings and things like that. So
we're running along. So Paul, I'm going to give you a quick opportunity because we haven't heard from you. Giving you a chance.
I was curious, where do you get your influence for your works of art? Is it just people you know, or stuff you read, movies? What do you think would be your biggest influence?
Great question. Well, there's no real influence. I mean, I could answer that question two different ways. When I start creating, and it really is a good question, by the way, because it's a good question, good opportunity for me to tell more about what I do, a unique facet of it, which is that when I start a sculpture, I have no idea what it's going to be, not a clue. There's no internal framework. It's not like I premeditate the frame underneath it first. There's no general skull even or anything like that. So I pretty much just I let the wood guide me. And the way I describe it is it's kind of like a Ouija board. You get to one letter, a bunch of letters make a word, a bunch of words make a sentence. You read it back and go, oh, that's what that says, that's what that is. And then, it's sort of like Wheel of Fortune or something where you're like, okay, that's kind of what, and then my deliberation comes in. And then I go, okay, well, this is going like that. So it's just visual sensibility and instinct at that point to kind of complete what wants to come out. I said, kind of think of myself as like a medium for revealing these spirits of nature, where I'm taking from the unmanifest and bringing it about. The most simple metaphor for that is like to not make it so complex as driftwood with these individual, snowflake things that nature makes. I guess nature already makes it manifest, but metaphorically it's from the unmanifest. Imagine